Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. And in February of 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm 80 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease, but I do kind of have a cold at the moment.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia. I've been on a ketogenic diet since April of 2014. When I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. Within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared.
Yes.
I've lost about 100 pounds, and I've completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of our experiences thriving for years in nutritional ketosis.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
Yeah, we're not doctors. We don't want to give anyone any medical advice, but we are keen to share our own experiences. We're actually both software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail, are we, Carl?
No way.
We have done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind them. We hope to share some of that research. Where possible, we intend to put links in the show notes to cite research supporting any claims that we make.
And you'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies.
Oh, yeah.
We love to cook, and we love to eat.
Yeah.
In every episode, we both share a keto recipe that cannot, will not, dare not be ignored. So let's start podcast number 110, Bec Johnson, type 1 diabetic superstar. Heard you say you're due for a little. So, Richard, do we have any apologies or corrections from last week's show?
Last week's show was the Keto Fest show.
Right.
I don't think we said anything wrong. We've got an update on Keto Fest, which we'll do later on in the show. But no, I think no errata that I know of.
Yeah, me either. So let's revisit what a ketogenic diet is. A ketogenic diet is any diet that puts you in a state of nutritional ketosis. Mm-hmm. And the surefire way to get there is by reducing carbohydrates to 20 grams or less per day.
Yep.
And only from non-starchy, sugary sources such as vegetables, maybe some eggs, some dairy, that kind of stuff, some cheese, heavy cream.
Yeah, that food doesn't have a lot of carbohydrates. It still has some. So you still have, one egg is going to have a gram of carbohydrates. So if you've only limiting yourself to 20 grams, that's not a lot of food. So you really can't afford in that window to be able to have potatoes and pasta and all the other things, bread, all the other things that have starch in them. Yeah.
And you don't miss them. But it's not a high protein diet either. It's a moderate protein diet. And we go by a calculation of 1 to 1.5 grams of protein every day for every kilogram of lean body mass that you have.
Yeah. Yeah, the range for safety is really between 1 gram and 3.3 grams, and you'll find somewhere in that range that's ideal for you. For us, between 1 and 1.5 grams has met all of our goals.
Yeah, and me even lower lately, but that's another story. All of our energy we get from fat.
Yeah, fat on your plate or fat from that Krispy Kreme that you ate a decade ago.
Exactly. So, Richard, how was your week?
It was pretty good. I went to Perth last weekend, and that was a low-carb conference in Perth, and I recorded a whole bunch of interviews, got some really good interviews. We're going to play one later on today, but we also got interviews with low-carb gurus like Professor Ken Sakaris, the lipidology guy, and pathologist, and also from Dr. Toy Stapleton, radiologist and type 1 diabetic. But we got lots of interesting interviews from people that aren't that well known in the keto community, but should be. And so so that was fun. And then I was sort of jet lagged. It's just kind of weird. I mean, Perth is like 2 or 3 hours away in time zones. It's about 4.5 hours flight away. And it was just weird that I was just jet lagged the whole week. But anyway, I'm finally starting to come good now, but I've been tired for uni the whole week. But, I've been catching up and now I'm finally coming good. And I've decided to start going to the uni gym as well, which is something new that I'm going to start doing as well. I'm also cycling, 20, 30K a day. So, it's I think it's just time for me to start doing a little bit more exercise. I just feel like doing it. It's not that I want to lose weight. It's just that I just feel like I want to start working more on flexibility and more on upper body strength, because a lot of my stuff is cycling. So that was my week. How was your week?
Pretty good, really good, actually. You heard me mention on last week's show that I developed a tremor, and I've sort of been noticing it more and more, and Jason Fung sort of diagnosed me as having an essential tremor.
Right.
So Virginia Gunther from RNA Reset was listening to that show, and she was like, that happens to a lot of people who go ketogenic and don't eat a lot of vegetables. Most of us have a magnesium deficiency.
Right.
She's a big proponent of magnesium, and one of the signs of not enough magnesium is tremors.
Yeah.
So she sent me a booklet. I read it. I started taking magnesium, and guess what? It went away.
They went away.
Look at this.
Yeah. So the tremors are normally in your hands. They shake a little bit, and
basically that's it. They're in my hands, and when I extend my hands out and hold my hands up, that's when you see it. If the hand is resting, on the desk, it won't shake. But
it won't shake.
But so it's basically nerves like in the arm, that kind of thing, that cause it to shake.
Yeah, so it's interesting that magnesium is commonly found in dark leafy greens.
Right.
The chlorophyll molecule actually has a magnesium right in its center.
Yeah.
And so if you want to look at magnesium in food, go look at things like spinach and broccoli, and not so much in things like cauliflower, which is almost the same plant as broccoli, because it doesn't have a lot of green in the actual florets that we eat. So that's one place to find it. But of course, you can supplement it, and traditionally, evolutionarily, we human beings really evolved and thrived along the shorelines, and the shorelines are where we get a lot of salt, and the salts around the shoreline, around the ocean, very high in things like iodine and magnesium.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So well done.
Thank you. And thank you, Virginia. And I believe they're coming to Keto Fest as well. So you can go to RNA Reset and read all about magnesium deficiencies and check out their products too.
Nice.
I'm also anticipating springtime here.
I bet you're ready for it by now.
Oh, yeah. Waiting for the summer to come. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, I'm looking forward to doing some more outdoor exercise as soon as it warms up.
Nice.
I don't like walking and running around in the cold, but
who does?
I'm gonna get out the 3-wheeler and start cycling around. I can't wait. Yeah. Well, Richard, I feel like giving away a mug. Do you?
Yeah, let's give away some loot.
Yeah, and we've picked one lucky member of the 2 Keto Dudes fan club to win a 2 Keto Dudes coffee mug today. And if you don't know what the fan club is, it's easy. You can join it. It's free. Go to fanclub.2keto.com and just answer a few questions, and we'll have your name and your email address, and you can just relax and wait for your name to be called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so who have we got this week?
Today's winner is Tegan Barcombe.
Congratulations, Tegan.
Congratulations,
you get a mug
Tegan.
with our mugs on it.
That's right.
And if you don't want to wait to win a mug, you can always buy one at gear.2keto.com and pick yourself up a t-shirt or other junk while you're at it.
Yeah, other junk that shall remain nameless.
Let's not go there again.
No, we're not going there. And that brings us to a segment we call... Mail time! All right.
What you got, Carl?
Well, this is actually a comment in Apple Podcasts, formerly iTunes, but it's not just for our podcast. It was actually left for the Obesity Code podcast, which we produce, right?
Yeah, nice.
And it's titled, Thank You, Dr. Fung, Megan, and the 2 Keto Dudes. And it's 5 stars, of course. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. I've followed Dr. Fung on dietdoctor.com, and I love Megan. Anywhere I've heard Dr. Fung, I've enjoyed his honesty and straightforwardness about how we are currently treating diabetes with carbs, and then wonder why it's a worsening epidemic, when we could treat it for free by changing what we eat and at the same time vastly improve our health in other areas. In the same way, we're treating obesity with tactics that have already been proven to fail. But the food and pharma industries seduce us with advertising, bad science, and addictive foods and harmful medicine. I've begun fasting with great success, been ketogenic for 6 months, and have lost 42 pounds that I feared I would be stuck with forever.
Oh, well done.
Best of all, I know this is permanent, and I will lose the remaining 30 pounds and stay a healthy weight. I want everyone to have the success and relief I have found. My whole future is different now, as well as my whole family's future. My husband is on board, and my 18-year-old son as well. We will be spared the illnesses and chronic disease so many others will have to deal with. Dr. Fung, you deserve the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
We couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's just you hear this over and over and over again. Not just people who listen to our podcast, but people who go ketogenic, and a whole host of things happen physiologically that reversing type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, all of these great weight loss, all these great testimonials. They just keep coming and coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what you got, Richard?
So I've got one here from the ketogenic forums. This was actually a personal message that was sent to Daisy, and I was CC'd into it. This message is from TJ, and TJ says, I've been listening to the Keto Woman podcast. There have definitely been episodes that I found super interesting, like the recent interview with Amber. That's Amber O'Hearn. It probably seems a bit weird, a guy listening to a podcast for women. My main motivation was for takeaway tidbits to share with my wife. I've been working on getting her to start keto over the last several months, and I had been sharing things I learned from the Two Keto Dudes podcast, but it was sharing stuff from Daisy's podcast from a woman that made the difference.
Awesome.
She recently joined the Kick-Ass Keto Bitches Facebook group. This is a group that Daisy runs, and she just started day 2 in keto. And TJ says, I just want to drop a quick note to let you guys know that I'm very grateful and can't possibly thank you enough for what you are doing.
Wow.
So that's a testimonial for another podcast that we produce, which is Daisy Brackenhall's Keto Woman. And in fact, we were actually on Keto Woman as guests.
Yeah.
So we were able to exhibit our feminine side, our X chromosomes.
Yeah, such as they are. So before we get to the interview today, let's do a Keto Fest update.
Sure. Yeah. So where are we at?
Well, we're over 80% funded.
Wow.
Yep. Through Kickstarter, we sold all the VIP tickets.
Nice.
We added a $100 option for live streaming so that people can watch it live.
Yeah.
And
that comes with a T-shirt as well, right? So
it comes with a T-shirt.
Yeah. If you kickstart any of the levels, you get all of the lower levels as well, and the T-shirts in the lower levels. So
that's right.
This is the only option really to get live streaming. After the Kickstarter, live streaming will be more expensive, and it won't come with a T-shirt. So
right.
Yeah, that's a big
after
option.
The Kickstarter, everything will be more expensive, and that's why we want a call to action right now, which is we haven't seen as many 2-day ticket sales as we wanted to, as we expected. All the VIP tickets are gone. Those went right away last year too.
They're very popular.
Yeah, but what we really need is to sell more of those 2-day tickets.
Sure.
Now, right now they're $300. And if you think that's expensive, just go check out some of the other low-carb conferences that are around.
Yeah,
and
most of those won't feed you either.
Yeah, they won't feed you, and they'll only be presentations. It won't be the party that Keto Fest is.
Yeah.
Also, that price is going up after the Kickstarter. It's going up to $350. So if you are on the fence about it and you want to save $50, now's the time to commit and get us over the hump.
Absolutely.
Just go to ketofest.com and make your pledge. So, Richard, we're going to play a recording of an interview that you did with Bec Johnson in Perth.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I went to the low carb conference in Perth, and this was run by MHS and Dr. Joe Kostrich, and so I got a whole bunch of interviews. But one of the presenters I'd never heard of before, and she gave a presentation that was like a TED talk. I was so impressed, and so I said to her, "Look, I'd really love to get an interview with you for the Two Keto Dudes podcast. She jumped at it. Now, Becca is the CEO of the Telethon Type 1 Diabetes Family Centre. And this is a charity, a local charity that is supported by the Telethon. This is a big event in Perth. Telethon runs every year. And it's a little bit like, Jerry Lewis's Telethon that he used to do every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that, but it's for the whole state of Western Australia, and it's unique to Western Australia. And they run it every year, and it basically funds a different charity every year. And her charity was the Type 1 Diabetes Family Centre, which is a family centre that it supports families of kids with Type 1 diabetes.
Awesome. When I listened to it, I was just amazed at how much stuff she has accomplished. So
yeah, there's nothing that she cannot do, apparently.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let Bec tell you about her story.
Great.
Okay, so I'm back again in Perth, and this is like my 7th audio recording, and we're here with Bec Johnson, and Bec Johnson is the CEO of
the Telethon Type 1 Diabetes Family Centre.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's an organisation that we set up here in Perth that is the first of its kind in Australia. We are acknowledging the real need for better social support for people with Type 1 diabetes. When I was diagnosed with Type 1, I remember having great medical care, but really needing help with the practical and social aspects of life with this new and very complex disease. And I was really lonely for a really long time. It was very isolating. I didn't know anyone. I didn't meet anyone with Type 1 diabetes for about 10 years. And I'll tell you the little story. The first time I met someone with Type 1, I was at my friend's house, and I opened their fridge because I was going low and I was hunting for some orange juice, and there was insulin in the butter compartment. And everybody who knows Type 1 diabetes knows that's where you store your insulin. And I said to my friend, "Has your housemate got Type 1 diabetes?" And she said, "Yeah." And she introduced me to my now good friend Sarah. And Sarah came through the door, and we had this conversation that just blew my mind. I had never met someone else with diabetes, and it was sort of went like, "Oh, you do that? I do that. You think like that? I think like that." And
was she also alone? She thought she was alone and had not met many
she'd
people
had diabetes since she was 4, and we were around the same age, and she had one other friend with Type 1. And I think since having that meeting and realizing the power of having a friend with diabetes, it really inspired me both professionally and personally to start building a tribe. I've got a amazing social group of people with Type 1 around me, adults with diabetes, and we connect online and we connect face to face, and we share tips and tricks and hacks and the things that we're being challenged by and the things that we're winning on. And it's really motivating, and that's really some of the main experience that fed back into how and why we set up the family centre.
So people may not know, even other Australians may not know, that WA has a telethon that runs every year and disperses money. It's basically a television event that is it's a charity drive, and it disperses money to worthy organisations. So how did you get involved with the telethon to start this whole thing up? Because it's a worthy thing. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had support from Channel 7's Telethon Trust and Lottery West, which is our state lotteries agency, and the state government, which donated the land to build the centre on, and the other 2 agencies gave us the construction money to build our fantastic centre. The Telethon Trust we connected in with through our board chairman, Jeff Newman. Jeff Newman is my uncle, so it's a true family centre. And it was very much his vision. Together we said for many years, we got to do something, because if I struggled so much and I had strong family support and was health literate, and I still really took diabetes hard, Jeff said, if Bec's like this, gosh, what's happening to all these other families? And he got really stuck into the space while I was away studying and gallivanting around the world. He started comparing balls for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation and really understanding the Type 1 community and the research space a little better. And when he pulled a board together and rang me up, I was in Fiji working for the Red Cross at the time, and he said, we've got look in at some land at the hospital campus in Osborne Park. Come back, let's make it happen.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
so you're educationally, you did a law degree, right? So you did you ever practice?
I lasted for 2 weeks.
I hear that story a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started law, and I found it very, very challenging and interesting as academic study. And I've got a real passion for social justice, but I didn't find that played out once I got into a corporate setting. And I bailed out and I bought a ticket to Thailand, much to my mother's chagrin, and took off and didn't come home for 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Just a gap year, Mum.
And I sailed boats around the world in the end. That was my job, delivering yachts from Europe to America, and had some wonderful adventures. Got into quite a lot of pickles in my with diabetes in particular. Yeah. My wonderful mum sent me care packages from Perth, Western Australia, to whatever port I was going to end up in a few weeks' time, of diabetes test strips and insulin and all the things that I was running out of. Yeah. And it gave me a really I was in a lot of developing countries throughout that time.
That would have been eye-opening.
It was. I remember noticing, because you're keyed into it, I think, when you manage a health condition, what other people were going through. And you're always on the lookout for other people who are living the same experience and trying to compare and contrast that. And I realized after a good, long, hard think that I'm interested in health. I read about health all the time. I think about my own health and others. And so that led me to come back and do a Master of Public Health with the University of Sydney. And that's what really guided me into the non-profit space. Yeah.
So I have an interesting, similar experience. I went down the route of studying math, pure math at uni, and I didn't actually finish the degree. I didn't finish the degree and work for 2 weeks. I recognized that unless I was in the top 0.1%, I was not going to be able to do maths as a career. I really would like to have done that, but I wasn't in the top 0.1%. Yeah. Maybe I was in the top 1%, but that wasn't going to be good enough. And so they were pigeonholing me into a career as a maths teacher, and I didn't want to do that. So I recognized that early on in the process. Went out, had a great career as a programmer, worked on Wall Street, all that kind of stuff. And then, got diabetes late in life. At 38, that's actually early in life, the kind of diabetes that I got. And, basically retired at 40 to try and work out what was going wrong with my metabolism? Why was I braking when other people weren't? And what was it about my metabolism that I could get some traction on and fix? It took me about a decade to find a ketogenic diet. I then became a podcaster. I'm actually going back to uni doing biochemistry, because I want to contribute to the sum of human knowledge by doing fundamental research, and I've got some plans and some ideas. And so I totally get how life, you think you're going in one direction, and then, in this case with me, I got late diagnosis. You'd had this diagnosis, from 17?
17, yeah.
Yeah.
In a funny way, nobody loves having type 1 diabetes, but
nobody loves having type 2 either.
There you go. But it's been a strange and curious blessing, because it has given me the most powerful sense of purpose. I think that knowing what I'm on this earth to do, and that is to connect and inform and inspire other people with type 1 who are like me, it's why I'm here, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
It's helped guide a lot of the decisions that I've made, and I'm now 34 and so proud to be part of the project that we're now running in Western Australia.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it is the most rewarding, satisfying, challenging job, and I've got type 1 diabetes to thank for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you connect kids together with social events, and you do like camps for teenagers, and you do you're telling the story about the pizza event. What was that?
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
So one of the things that we do is we cook with the kids. So we firmly believe that the medical model is one aspect of diabetes care, but there are 3 other pillars of good diabetes care. Insulin therapy, essential.
Yeah.
Peer support, often forgotten, but absolutely critical. Physical activity, a lot of fear in our community around that. Not well promoted.
Yeah.
People.
How can I exercise if I'm going to go hypo?
Exactly. We only just had international consensus guidelines issued around exercise and type 1 diabetes last year.
Wow.
So, and even they are the beginning of the puzzle. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in raising confidence, I think, around being physically active with type 1 diabetes. And I think that is really, really speaks to the statistics that we've got around obesity and overweight rates in the type 1 population. And this is certainly something where we need to do some work. So we have a life without limits message. We get kids in front of people who've done amazing stuff. Sebastian Sassville, who has type 1 and ran across Canada.
Yeah, and you've done some stuff as well. You did an amazing marathon swim to Rottnest Island, right?
I did a 20-kilometre swim last year, open water swim, and I'd certainly love to go into that, but I will circle back to the pizza.
Yeah, sure.
Because that fourth pillar of diabetes care is nutrition and food. And we believe that you can make smart decisions around food that impact your blood glucose just as powerfully as your insulin decisions.
Yes.
But we don't shine enough of a light on it in our traditional care. And I think the best practice care that's delivered at the moment says that kids will get 4 clinic sessions a year. That's what you should get. And at each clinic, you'll check in with the medical side of the team. Right. But only at one of those sessions should you get a dietetic review. Once annually. Wow. That's standard of care. Yeah. Now, I think that dietetics and nutrition and the food conversation needs to be front and center alongside the medical.
Absolutely.
So long story, but we cook with the kids. We have a Kids in the Kitchen program. We have teen cooking as well. And to a large extent, it's just about hanging out because, if somebody had said, "Oh, Bec, I want you to go into this place and they're going to do a program for kids with diabetes," I would have run screaming in the opposite direction. So this is about getting kids in under the pretext of doing something fun and cool.
Yeah. And getting you into the event as well. So,
exactly. If I was that age, that wouldn't have been my thing. It's like saying all of you kids sit on a bus because you've all got blue eyes, so you should, have something in common. You don't necessarily want to sit and talk about type 1 diabetes when you're a teenager and feelings and all that sort of stuff. But we get them in, we get our hands dirty, we have a great time making food. And I think one of the things that we do is give kids a choice around what is it that you want to eat, and let's talk about how that's going to influence your blood glucose. So the pizza night, we got them all in and everybody said, "You guys are mad doing a pizza night." Pizza is kryptonite for people with type 1 diabetes because you've got all that carbohydrate and all that fat, and that hangs around for a really long time. And
so the fat extends the absorption of carbohydrates. So
absolutely.
For type 1, for type 2, we know that fat's not manipulating our insulin, but for a type 1, it's slowing the release of the carbohydrates, and so that it changes how you're going to have to dose your insulin.
Well, exactly. And if you don't do it right, we're talking about elevated blood glucose for up to 8 or 9 hours after eating pizza or fish and chips or one of those high fat, high carb foods. And that's really difficult to manipulate a rapid acting insulin that the lifespan of that rapid-acting insulin is 3 hours. So we're talking about multiple boluses, extended boluses, all these crazy pump settings that you can utilize, or using different types of insulins or multiple injections. So it's a palaver. You got to do string theory to deal with pizza. But this is really around, okay, well, let's work out another way to do pizza rather than working out the string theory with the insulin. Let's help with that. So we got them in. We made a normal pizza base because, there are some kids that their palates are adjusted a certain way and there's going to be really hard to change. So we had that for them, but we also made a cauliflower one. We made the fathead one. Nice. We made a zucchini one, and we made one from the protein bread company. And the kids got to try all of them. We said, have a bit. This is how much carbohydrate is in each slice of each one of these. It's up to you what you have. Yeah. Eat, enjoy, and then let's have a look at your continuous glucose monitors. And I can feel confident to say that not a single one of those kids walked out of that pizza night with sky-high blood glucose. Wow. And they all had a good night afterwards. They
Outstanding.
weren't. And that's what we want. And it was very interesting.
That's the benchmark, is it give these kids a normal experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And the bit that I loved, the real clincher, was that the one that they left the most of was the normal pizza base. Yeah. They ate up the whole cauliflower one. I had mums coming in going, going, you got my kid eating cauliflower? So it was good.
Pizza. Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, that was a good night. And I think that's what we do at the Family Centre. It's not around, our position is not that low carbohydrate diets are the only way to manage diabetes. No. We acknowledge and respect and honour that there are different palates, there are different cultural pressures on the way people eat, that people have different budgets, people have different levels of motivation and skills around cooking and food. So we do, though, acknowledge there's a spectrum of ways to manage diabetes, and low carb is a legitimate and effective tool.
That's the critical thing, because a lot of the diabetes peak bodies, and I'd put you guys in the category of a peak body responsible for helping move us forward on the diabetes picture. A lot of the diabetics peak bodies don't even admit that that's an option, that a low-carb ketogenic diet is an option. And that's my personal focus to try and change. I don't want to make everyone eat a ketogenic diet. I really don't care what other people eat, as long as other diabetics have the option. And right now, we don't have the option.
And I think even more than the option, I think having seen a number of people, adults in my world in particular, who have gone and tried to go onto a lower carbohydrate approach or even a keto approach on their own, using resources that they've read or found online that may not have given them the information that they need. I think we need more than just the option. I think we need support, targeted clinical dietetic support for people who really do need to make sure that they're hitting their micronutrient targets and their energy needs, because it's very demotivating if you try something and you don't adjust your insulin downwards adequately and you end up on the floor with multiple hypos, which is the first thing that can happen.
Sure.
And then you find you're tired because you've cut out a certain aspect of your food, normal food, and you're not getting enough energy in. And that's really standard as well. So the option, absolutely, but the option and the support that people can do it safely and effectively and sustainably.
Yeah. Because right now dietitians get delisted if Jennifer Evans was kicked out of basically prevented from accessing Medicare by losing her DAA accreditation because she recommended a ketogenic diet to a diabetic. So,
well, look, I see CSIRO, Australia's peak government scientific body,
putting out version of the NIH.
Putting out a low carbohydrate diet for type 2 diabetics, and multiple cookbooks around it, and it's being endorsed by their top level scientists. So I think that in that sense, the Dietitians Association of Australia is in conflict with CSIRO if they're acting as you've described, and that needs to be resolved. And I think we have an opportunity now with a new incoming CEO for the DAA to join the Australian Health Practitioners Regulation Agency.
Absolutely.
To become transparent about the funding that it takes in from big food, or kill that entirely, ideally, and that sponsorship level, and really start to join the ranks of associations that are operating in a way that's accountable to the public.
They really need to bifurcate into a lobby group and a peak body group, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to straddle the bridge of both a lobby group for their interests and their corporate interests, and a peak body group for. They purport not to be advising for disease states for people who the Australian Dietary Guidelines is only for people who are healthy and normal, for whatever that means. But it's not enough to get them out of responsibility for coming up with a solution for diabetics. And we now have, with the VERTA study, at least for type 2 diabetics, we've got incontrovertible clinical data that shows that we can get type 2 diabetics, 90% of type 2 diabetics off all their medication and 60% reversing their disease. We need the same kind of stuff for type 1 diabetics, and that's something that is apparently coming. It was evident at the presentations yesterday that there are PhD students already now working on ketogenic diets in type 1 diabetics, and so that's fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. Speaking of which, you've actually been ketogenic for 17 years, right?
I've been low carb for 17 years and I've been keto since 2013.
Wow.
Yeah. So after I was diagnosed,
And At 17, right?
At 17, I was put on around 50 units of insulin a day, and I was told to eat according to the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. So, 8 to 12 serves of breads and cereals and starchy vegetables. And I dutifully did so. I had breakfast cereal and toast and sandwiches for lunch and pasta by the bowlful for dinner. And I was dosing these industrial doses of insulin to try and cover it. And my glucose was surging high after every meal from the tsunamis of glucose and carbohydrates that I was putting in, and then crashing down afterwards from these huge doses of insulin. I would put on weight. I felt so unhappy. I felt so much fear. I felt afraid to go to sleep because I had so many incapacitating hypos throughout the night. And I remember waking up about 8 months into my experience and thinking, I've had enough. I'm not prepared to live like this. There's got to be another way. And I read about Dr. Bernstein and his book, The Diabetes Solution, online, and I saved up I was earning $11 an hour in a video store, and I had to save up for $66 to send away for this book, and it took weeks to come because there was no Amazon or book depository back then. And I got it, and I remember I almost devoured it in a few days, and that's no mean feat if you've read Dr. Bernstein. But it was so logical to me, and it made so much sense, and it aligned with the way that I was already thinking about why the hell am I eating all this carbohydrate if I have a disease of carbohydrate metabolism?
Totally, yeah.
And I pulled the high level principles and applied them, and almost overnight everything changed. My blood glucose stabilized. I dropped my doses back to less than 25% of my previous total, and I still take between 12 and 17 units of insulin total a day, 17 years in. I was able to go for a run confidently on my own. I could sleep through the night without feeling afraid, and I got my quality of life back. And I think that I did it on my own, and that was the hardest part. And I found that to me it made sense and there was logic in it, but I was constantly defending it to others around me because this is a long time before people talked about low carb, high fat on podcasts or had presentations about it, or there was any internet resources on it. There weren't any forums or anywhere where I could go. So that was a real struggle, was holding on to what I knew was my truth and the thing I needed to do for my health, but at quite a young age.
It's quite isolating, I would have thought, because you're going up against experts here.
Absolutely.
And that would have been terrifying.
My diabetes team included.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the more isolating things, was I disconnected from my health team because we just bumped up against each other in relation to how I was managing my diabetes. And so I was not only without support from my social circle, I was without support from a diabetes team as well. Yeah. So it wasn't perfect, but I knew that was what I needed to do.
Yeah. There's a lot of commonality between the experience. I mean, type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes are two totally different diseases, and they really shouldn't both be called diabetes. The reason they are is because it's a diagnostic criteria. It's glucose goes too high, that's diabetes. We only diagnose diabetes when glucose goes high, and then we lump everybody in the same basket. But there is a lot of commonality between the two experiences, because I had a similar thing. The book for me that changed my life was Art and Science of Low Carb Living by Steve Finney and Jeff Volek. And that was a light bulb moment. It was, yes, that makes sense. You know, why am I eating a diet high in carbohydrates when I can't tolerate a lot of carbohydrates? And I think that and I had the same problem with my certified diabetes educator. I was told that if I spoke about low carbohydrate diets in group sessions, I'd be kicked out of the group. And, I was given a diet and told, 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. And I said, well, look, in the 2004, I went on an Atkins diet, and that actually helped me. I felt good there. And they said, you are absolutely not to do that because it's not good for diabetics. It's okay for people who are on fad diets and able to flip in and out of it. You can't do it. Your metabolism, you must have glucose. And so, I know, right? Slap your forehead. That's ridiculous. So, even though the two diseases are different, we get lumped into the same kind of thing. And I think that one difference I would remark about type 1 diabetes, or my observation of the difference, is that the experience by just about every every type 1 diabetic, when they first get diagnosed, is a dramatic depression, and it's fear, because it's a critical thing that could take you in your sleep. And for a type 2 diabetic, it's shame. It's like, you did this to yourself. And so there's less sort of, for a type 2, maybe we're a little bit luckier as a type 2 diabetic, because we can say, oh, well, I did this to myself, Whereas for type 1 diabetic, it's, the world is against me, that poor me, why has this happened to me? And I guess shame in a funny kind of way gives you permission to accept what has happened, whereas it's a little bit difficult for, or different in a type 1. But from that point onwards, the fact that our dietetic standards have taken us down a dogmatic path, and we live on a different path. Our metabolism's unable to survive that without progressing our disease or having deathly hypos, or lapsing into diabetic comas. All of these kinds of horrible things that could happen to us if we follow the experts. That's why it's so good to have an organisation like yours. It's dealing with, even if it's just dealing with type 1 diabetic kids, it's a start, and it's giving them a normalcy, a normal experience. And you, as somebody who's been ketogenic, or at least low carb, for so long, your lived example for these kids is remarkable. And I really want to talk about your swim to Roddy. I mean, how did that happen?
I needed a challenge about 18 months ago. I've swum my whole life, but I'd had a big hiatus because I'd been overseas, and I'm very active. I love riding bikes and sailing and diving and doing all that stuff, but the ocean is home for me. And the idea of a big open water swim like that, I've always looked across to Rottnest Island from the beach here and thought, I'll swim there one day.
Yeah.
And I've done the swim as a duo and as multiple teams, and it came up, and I kept on thinking about it, and I thought, okay, I don't know if this is something that I can do with type 1, but damn, I'd really like to try. And the Freestyle Libre device was released, and I think that really pushed me over into the challenge, because I had trouble with marathon swimming in relation to blood glucose testing. It's the biggest challenge, because when my fingers are cold and wet, and when I'm not allowed to touch the paddler, because I'll be my support paddler, because that's a disqualification. It's almost impossible to test blood glucose with a finger prick.
Yeah, you can't draw capillary blood when your fingers are cold. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And when they're wet, it's even more impossible to get a solid blood drop to put onto a machine. So I remember a few years ago, I did a 10K swim with my mate, and we thought, we'll give this a go. And I was treading water furiously with my hands out, and we were drying my fingers off, and I was doing it all. And this huge wave came out of nowhere, and she ended up in the drink, and all my BG testing stuff ended up at the bottom of the ocean. So we just gave up. And anyway, and continuous glucose monitors are fantastic, but they don't transmit in the water.
Yeah.
So when this Freestyle Libre device, the flash monitor, came out, I thought, wacko, I can do this.
I saw it under your arm when you lifted your arm up there. It's just like a little white disc with a sticky that sticks to the underside of your arm.
So it's about the size of a 20-cent piece, and it lasts for 2 weeks, and it has a little
the size of a Susan B. Anthony for my American friends.
Right, okay. And it has a little fiber that's inserted under my skin, and it measures the glucose between the cells, the interstitial fluid.
Sure.
And I can scan a receiver, or now my phone, and it will tell me what my blood glucose is. It will give me an 8-hour history and a current trend as well. So really good information.
Lovely.
So I put the receiver in a waterproof bag, and I could stick it down the back of my swimming togs, and I could train, and I was totally self-sufficient in the water.
Yeah.
So I could do these
How
huge
sets. That must have been. Yeah.
It was awesome, because before, when I was training, I used to ride my bike all the way along the beach and drop blood glucose monitors and glucose seriously every kilometre. It was just madness.
So you had to do a whole pre-stage for the
to do a training set, and it was just too much. So now I could go out and I could swim for 10Ks with my mates and not have to go into shore once. So that was cool. And that was the thing. So I started training, and the campaign was a sort of its 8 months training campaign, and the day dawned, and I was ready, and I was well and truly fat adapted. I've been, as I said, I've been eating keto, less than 30 grams of carbohydrates a day for 5 or 6 years at that point. And I was pretty nervous, so I just had a couple of little protein coconut oil ball things I call amaze balls. The recipe's on my blog. My blog's called Swimsulin.
Well, we actually have a recipe section after the interview. Carl and I will each do a recipe. So if you don't mind, can I do your amaze balls as a recipe? There you go.
Yep.
So Carl's got to do some work. I've done my job.
There you go. You're sorted. So I had a couple of my amaze balls and a bulletproof coffee. And little did I know that was going to be the only food I was going to have for the rest of the day. So I got down the beach about 4:30 in the morning, and we jumped in, and my sugar level was 8.1 at that point.
Yeah.
And we swam. The first 10 Ks I was on point. Did that 3.5 hours. That was the time I'd aimed for. I was keen for a 7-hour crossing. But there was a little choppy wave over my right-hand shoulder, and I swallowed a lot of seawater. And I started feeling pretty sick in the belly, and I started being sick. And that was I was so dismayed when I realized that I was seasick, because it's pretty hard to shake unless you get back onto dry land, and I had a long way to swim before dry land. So I was unfortunately sick every 15 or 20 minutes for the next 6 hours in the water.
I can't even imagine vomiting it while swimming in seawater. It's
disgusting.
I don't want to know that part of it. But I mean, you take an involuntary breath in before you vomit, and it's just like with the water. And
the thing is, I wasn't even allowed to hang on to anything.
Right.
So not only was I sick and cold and freezing, tired and exhausted and being sick, I had to tread water and keep my face out of the water so I could breathe. So
couldn't you do a bit of backstroke and just?
Yeah, I probably did, But anyway, we got stuck in this huge current, and the whole fleet got pushed southwards so hard. So there was one point I swam for 2 hours and I gained no ground and sick and tired. But what I do know is that I did that whole swim. I was in the water for 9 hours and 54 minutes, and I had virtually no hydration or nutrition for most of that swim. I had a few sips of water every time I was sick and some hydration salts. I didn't eat anything. And if I had have been glucose adapted, and if I had have needed to stop for gel shots and baby puree and all the mad things people eat every 30 minutes,
you would have had
I would never have made it.
You would have had to be pulled from the race,
No way. Because the idea that with a ketogenic diet, I have adapted my body to burn fat preferentially to glucose, means I have an almost endless supply of energy. I could swim to Madagascar with the fat in my left bum cheek. So that to me is the holy grail. I've got an endless supply of energy. Yeah. I can exercise relentlessly, and I can achieve stable blood glucose levels because I'm not constantly inputting carbohydrate and insulin and messing around with that. So to me, it was mind-blowing the things that you can achieve from an endurance sports perspective using keto, and even better with diabetes.
Yeah, I can fast for 3 days without missing a beat, hop on my bike and ride for 4 hours, 100 kilometres. And the first maybe 15 minutes might be a little bit difficult, but because I'm trying to my body is running out of fuel at that point and having to drop insulin low. But once it gets low and I have access to my body fat for reserves, I get off the bike after 4 hours, and I literally feel like I could do that for another 4 hours. It wouldn't make any difference to me. So, and a funny story, I'm also, some of these cycles I do, every 15 minutes I have my alarm go off, and my BG monitor. I don't have one of your fancy continuous glucose monitors, so I've got to do ketone and blood testing, because when I do these, sometimes I do experiments like I try to deplete all my glycogen and then eat a whey shake and look at how long it takes my glucose to come back up again, and that then gives me an indication of how much insulin is being produced by the whey to drag my circulating glucose into muscles. And so it's like a proxy for how much insulin is being produced by the whey. So I do these experiments and fancy stuff. And it'll be on my podcast. We talk about that sometimes.
I will definitely listen to that. Because that sounds like a really curious experiment to do.
So that's a fun experiment. I'll put a link to the article that I wrote on the ketogenic forums about this particular experiment in the show notes for this. So you get to Rottnest Island. What was the experience of finishing that after having, for 2 hours you were at a standstill, and you swam for 9 hours 55 minutes?
Yeah.
What was the experience of finishing?
Oh, it was incredible. The island sort of pulls you in, and it takes a very long time. You see the bottom for a long time, but it's just tantalizingly a little bit too deep to stand up. And I remember trying to stand up about 7 or 8 times, and my feet didn't touch the bottom. I was but when I finally got to the point where I was in waist deep water and I could stand up, and I couldn't see because my eyes were so swollen up from the salt and
dehydration.
And then I must have looked like the creature from the Black Lagoon. And I could hear the voices all around me from all of the people that had come to the island to welcome me back, welcome me there. And, Bec, oh, you made it. Yeah. And I was so far behind. A lot of them they all had 5 o'clock ferry tickets. So a lot of them sort of said, well done, I gotta go. But it was the most amazing sense of achievement that I had gotten there. I was so proud of myself, and I think the exciting thing was I'm able to come back to our community now and go, look what people with type 1 diabetes in your world are able to achieve. And I think that means so much to me to be able to say to the kids, see that island over there? I swam there. And one day you might be able to as well.
You take them for a trip on the ferry and say, you could always swim back if you want.
I might not come this time.
Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us. And your presentation yesterday was wonderful. It was like a TED Talk, and really, you should be on TED doing that as a TED Talk. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and good luck with the project. And let us know if we can help at all.
Thank you very much.
Nice, thank you.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
Wow, truly inspirational.
Yeah, there was one thing I didn't ask her about during this interview, and I can't believe I didn't mention it. She has just co-authored a paper with dietitian Karen Zinn that has been published in the I think it was published in the BMJ, and it is a formulation of a ketogenic diet that is nutritionally sound, has all of the essential nutrition. And this is something apparently that's never been done before.
Wow.
So we'll put links into the show notes to that study.
Fantastic.
I can't believe I didn't mention it in the interview, but that's another outstanding thing that this wonderful woman has done.
Wow, awesome. So you feeling peckish, my friend?
Yeah, I kind of am. I think it's time for some
recipes.
That's Carl. He always likes to get the last word in.
No, it's just because I got sexy phlegm today.
Uh-oh.
I did, actually, I'm getting over a chest cold, so I wanted to give everybody the benefit of hearing that.
Well, my recipe that I'm going to do today is actually Becca's recipe, and you'll know if you listen to the interview that I promised to do this recipe. And this is the nutrition that she ate when she did her Roto swim, and these are amaze balls.
Amaze balls.
And they make about 25, and they are about 4 grams of carbohydrates each. So this is not something necessarily that a low carb ketogenic type 2 diabetic who's not exercising is going to want to make for themselves. But I'll suggest a couple of substitutions that would enable us to be able to use them, maybe be lower carb.
Okay. Amaze
balls are these coconut covered chocolate balls. They're high protein, and they have, as I say, 4 grams of carbs. They're designed to enable her to be able to have nutrition when she's doing her marathon swims.
And energy from the carbs, yeah.
That's right. So, So the amaze balls, I make about 25. She starts with some protein powder. She uses whey, but you can use pea or brown rice protein, which will also work. And you can probably use egg white protein as well, egg white powder. These are all reasonable proteins to use. 100 grams of that. And then she has 80 grams of dried dates soaked in hot water for 30 minutes. Now, dates are about 70% glucose, and that's where all the carbs are in this. So I'm going to suggest that towards the end, I'm going to suggest some alternatives for using dates. But she also suggests having 140 grams of walnuts, 140 grams of almonds, about 50 grams of coconut oil, some coconut powder, about 3 tablespoons of coconut powder, and some vanilla essence. She has about a teaspoon of vanilla essence and a little bit of water and some desiccated coconut for rolling. So the method is easy, and we'll put links to her blog with all of the details for the recipe. She puts all the ingredients except the water in a food processor, and she whizzes it until it basically combines, and the dates are really binding the food together. That's why I've left them in her recipe. And then if it looks a little bit too dry, you add water and blitz it again, and just use that. Basically, you're going to slowly add water until it gets just the right consistency, and then you form it into balls. You roll it in coconut, and you store it in the fridge, and then you can enjoy them. So I would say, as a replacement for dates, what I would do is I would get some coconut flakes or desiccated coconut and coconut oil, and I'd blend that up till it's like a nut butter, like a coconut nut butter, and I'd use that instead, and that will probably work to bind the balls together. So that's my suggestion for that recipe.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try that. I'm just going to try it with the dates and just 4 grams of carbs. I'll only have one, and I want to taste what they taste like for her.
Sure.
So that's my recipe. So what have you got, Carl?
That's very good. Sounds amazeballs.
So what do you got?
Well, I have something that I'm calling in, deference to Bec, amaze cheese. With a Z.
With amaze cheese.
Cheez. So, American cheese, for those who grew up eating it, is kind of addictive, We like it on sandwiches. In this country, if you like American cheese, you really like American cheese.
Cheese slices.
Cheese slices. Processed cheese food.
We'd call them Kraft slices in Australia.
Well, that's the brand, of course, Kraft slices.
Yeah, but they're the only ones that make the sliced cheese here. So
okay.
It's like Clinics, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of types of processed cheese, and a lot of them aren't good for you. The Kraft Deli Deluxe ones seem to be, no oil or any of that stuff. It's just just cheese.
Yeah.
But it is processed, and if you miss it, this is what I'm saying. If you miss it, there's a great way that you can make superior cheese slices.
Okay.
And have them at the ready and go to town.
Awesome.
That's what this is. So we've done the trisodium citrate cheese sauce twice. Yeah. I did it early on in the show history, and then you did a more watery one that you used the magic bullet for.
Yeah,
a looser one.
My cheesy balls were also using this as well.
Yep, but this is essentially you're making this with the right combination of cheese, and then you're letting it set in the fridge in a square container, and then you pull it out and make slices off of it with a cheese slicer. And those can go right on your burgers. They can go over steak. They can go over anything, go over broccoli. And because they've been made with a trisodium citrate, when it melts, it just, it turns into that melty, gooey, stringy cheese. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So trisodium citrate is a salt that is designed to enable cheese to emulsify in water.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what you want to do is order some of that. I ordered it through Amazon.com, but you can, just look for trisodium citrate.
Yep.
You get 2/3 of a cup of water in a pot and add a tablespoon of trisodium citrate to that.
Doesn't need much, yeah.
Doesn't need much. You want a teaspoon of salt and black pepper to taste, maybe another teaspoon of that. Now, here's the magic combination for me. 8 ounces of sharp cheddar. You want this grated, of course. 8 ounces of smoked Gouda.
Ooh, yeah.
Now, smoked Gouda melts a little weird, but it can't resist trisodium citrate. It turns into a beautiful sauce.
Yeah.
And then 8 ounces of Parmesan, shredded Parmesan cheese. And I didn't use Parmigiano Reggiano. I just used the store-bought Parmesan that has the big flakes. So it does have a little, it's more like cheddar. It has more give to it.
It's like a dried cheddar, yeah.
Yep. So what you do is you bring the water, salt, pepper, and trisodium citrate to a boil. Just as soon as it boils, you turn it down to low. You add the cheese, all of it, and stir it until it's melted and nicely melted. And right then, it's going to be very thick, and it's going to go well on your bacon burger, your butter poached burger, whatever sandwich of the day, on oopsie bread or whatever your favorite. Right now, it's the perfect thick cheese sauce. It's
Cheese
thick.
sauce, yeah.
It won't
Right.
run. It's very thick.
Viscous, yeah.
Yeah, very viscous. So what you do is you allow it to cool slightly, and you just pour it into a square Tupperware or, plastic bin in the fridge.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in the fridge, and then, like I said, when you're ready for a slice of cheese, you just pull that off, get yourself a cheese slicer, and go to town.
So it's like an adult version of cheese singles.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly.
With better cheese as well. I mean, this is not the rubbish stuff that is in singles. This is good cheese. And if you want to make it really look like American cheese, you can add the yellow dye called annatto to it and turn it orange, it's like the weirdest thing for Aussies. We used to yellow cheese or even white cheese. We don't have orange cheese. There's like red Leicester is probably the only orange cheese that we've got.
Yeah.
And like in America, every single cheese is pretty much orange.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
It is weird, but, if you don't want your guests to freak out and,
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, when it melts, of course, it's going to...
Does it melt properly?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. I made a grilled cheese sandwich for Kelly with this stuff, and she was like, I don't know. And I said, well, what about the taste or the texture? It was more the taste, but the texture was great. It melted. It was wonderful. So that's it, man. That's a show.
Of course, if you have anything that you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something you don't agree with, some more research that you found to support or refute anything we've said, send it by email to dudes@twoketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter at 2KetoDudes, on Instagram at 2KetoDudes, and make sure to use the hashtag 2KetoDudes.
And of course, if you want to join the free ketogenic forum, it's forum.2keto.com.
And if useless swag is your fancy, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other junk with witty keto sayings on them, head over to gear.2keto.com.
And if you want a shot at getting some of that swag for free, join the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. You'll be eligible to win something in every show. Go to fanclub.2keto.com.
And if you feel like supporting our forums and all the podcasts we produce, including 2 Keto Dudes, Keto Woman with Daisy Brackenhall, the Obesity Code podcast with Jason Fung and Megan Ramos, and making its debut very shortly, Keto Families and Keto Kids with Karen and Mark. Think about making a monthly pledge on our Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com.
Or just hit the donate button on our website at www.2ketodudes.com or just go to donate.2keto.com.
You can also see our videos, our podcasts, other videos like from Keto Fest on YouTube at youtube.2keto.com.
And if you haven't already bought a ticket to Keto Fest, you better go and get that while the Kickstarter is going, because after the Kickstarter, those prices are going up. And if you haven't already, go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That's how new people get to know about what we do.
2 Keto Dudes is brought to you by 2 Keto LLC, who strives to support the low-carb community with podcasts and other publications. And that brings us to that very special phrase, keep calm and keto on. Richard?
Now, keep calm and keto on, Carl.
All right, we'll see you next time on 2 Keto Dudes.